The highway hypnosis was starting to set in, the white lines blurring into a single, continuous ribbon, pulling me deeper into the night. 12 hours. 12 hours I'd been driving, fueled by gas station coffee that tasted, gusted like burnt plastic, and the kind of grim determination that only comes when you're driving away from something, just as much as you're driving towards it. Chicago was receding in my rearview mirror, a life packed into boxes in the back seat, and Seattle, well, Seattle was still a long, long way off. A new job, a clean slate. That's what I kept telling myself. My eyelids felt like sandpaper rubbing against gravel. The digital clock on the dash glowed. 1:47 a.m. I'd promised myself I'd push through to Springfield, find a decent chain hotel, something predictable and sterile. But the last highway, sign warning of no services, next 80 miles, had popped up about 20 minutes ago, and my fuel gauge was dipping nervously towards E. Pulling over wasn't an option out here, not on this desolate stretch of whatever it was. Then, like a half-forgotten dream, a sign flickered into existence on the right side of the road, barely visible through the misty drizzle that had started. Stierlu GT. Motel VHCNCY. The S in starlight buzzed erratically, casting pulsing shadows on the wet asphalt of the exit ramp that seemed to appear out of nowhere. It wasn't exactly the Hilton, but beggars' choosers, and all that. I took the exit. The motel looked like something time had chewed on and spat out. A long, low building, maybe 2 stories, with paint peeling off the wooden railings. Outside the upper rooms, half the lights along the walkway were out. It sat squat and isolated, surrounded by dark fields and the sighing emptiness of the interstate somewhere behind it. The parking lot held only 2 other vehicles, a beat-up pickup truck and an ancient-looking sedan that might have been gray, or maybe just coated in a thick layer of grime. I parked my sedan near the office, the only part of the building that seemed fully awake, casting a sickly yellow glow onto the damp pavement. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the door. A small bell above it announcing my arrival with a surprisingly loud jingle. The air inside was thick, with the smell of cigarette smoke and something vaguely chemical, like industrial strength cleaner, fighting a losing battle against decades of mildew. The lobby was small, paneled in dark, fake wood. A worn couch sagged against one wall, and a dusty plastic plant sat in the corner. Behind the counter stood a man, probably in his late 50s, with thinning gray hair, combed meticulously over a pale scalp. He wore a faded plaid shirt buttoned up to the neck. He didn't look up immediately, just continued whatever he was doing behind the counter, hidden from my view. There was a small, old CRT monitor, angled away from me, flickering silently. "Oh, excuse me," I said, my voice sounding rough from disuse. He finally looked up, his eyes pale and watery. He didn't smile. "Need a room?" His voice was flat, devoid of inflection. "Yeah, just for the night. Non-smoking, if you have it." He turned to a board behind him, filled with keys hanging on hooks. He squinted at it for a moment, then pulled one down. "Room 7. Second floor, end of the hall on the left." He slid a registration card across the counter. Need your license and a card for incidentals. As I filled out the card, trying to make my sleep deprived scrawl legible, I glanced at the monitor again. He hadn't turned it off, just shifted slightly so I couldn't see the screen. An odd prickle of unease went down my spine. Probably just watching security feeds, I told myself. Still, I handed him my cards. He processed the payment slowly, deliberately, his fingers tapping on the keyboard with agonizing slowness. The silence stretched, broken, only by the hud of a fluorescent light overhead and the distant rumble of a truck passing on the highway. Everything okay back there? I asked, trying to sound casual. He glanced up, his expression unreadable. Just the system being slow. He slid my cards and the room key back across the counter. Room 7. Quiet room. He paused, then added, almost as an afterthought. Hasn't had complaints lately. Right? Thanks. I grabbed the key, a real metal key. Not a card, and headed back out into the drizzle. The stairs to the second floor were wooden and slick with rain. The hallway was dimly lit, the carpet worn thin and patterned with stains. I didn't want to examine too closely. Reaching the end of the hall, I found room 7. The number was painted directly onto the door. The paint cracked and faded. I jammed the key into the lock. It turned with a rusty groan, and I pushed the door open. The smell hit me first, the same stale smoke and chemical cleaner as the lobby, but stronger here, mixed with a faint, underlying mustiness. I fumbled for the light switch just inside the door. The room was basic. Depressingly so. A double bed covered with a thin, brown bedspread that looked like it had seen better decades. A small, scarred wooden desk and chair. A bulky, old-fashioned television set bolted to a stand. Peeling wallpaper in a faded floral pattern. The window looked out over the dark, empty fields behind the motel. The air felt heavy, stagnant. I dropped my overnight bag on the floor and crossed to the window, checking the lock. It seemed secure enough. I drew the thin, grimy curtains closed. The silence in the room felt different from the silence outside, thicker, somehow more watchful. I shook my head. Get a grip, Ethan. You're just exhausted. I unpacked my toiletries, setting them on the small counter in the bathroom. The bathroom itself was tiny, with cracked linoleum flooring and a shower stall that looked suspiciously mildewed in the corners. I decided a shower could wait until morning. As I turned to leave the bathroom, the overhead light flickered violently for a few seconds, then steadied. Faulty wiring, I thought. Old place. Back in the main room, I sat on the edge of the bed. It sagged alarmingly under my weight. I glanced at the nightstand, where I'd tossed my car keys just moments before. They weren't there. Frowning, I scanned the small room. My gaze landed on the desk across the room. There they were, sitting neatly beside the bolted down phone. I could have sworn I'd put them on the nightstand. Must have been more tired than I thought. Just absent-mindedly put them down over there. Yeah, that was it. Still, the unease lingered. I wasn't usually the paranoid type, but something about this place felt off. Maybe it was the isolation, the weird clerk, the general air of neglect. I decided to wedge the room's single, flimsy chair under the doorknob, just in case. It didn't make me feel much better, but it was something. I stripped down to my boxers and T-shirt and crawled under the questionable bedspread. The sheets felt rough against my skin, and the pillow was thin and lumpy. I turned off the bedside lamp, plunging the room into near total darkness, save for the thin line of yellow light seeping under the door from the hallway. Lying there, listening to the sound of my own breathing, the feeling started to creep in. Subtle at first, just a prickle on the back of my neck. Then stronger. The distinct, undeniable sensation of being watched. My eyes snapped open, scanning the impenetrable darkness of the room. Nothing. Just shadows that seemed deeper than they should be. I closed my eyes again, forcing myself to relax. It's the drive, I told myself. It's the creepy motel. It's exhaustion playing tricks on my mind. Breathe. Sleep. Just as the edges of consciousness started to blur, just as sleep began to pull me under, I heard it. Scratch. 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 It was soft but distinct, and it wasn't coming from outside. It sounded like it was coming from inside the wall, right behind the headboard of the bed. My heart hammered against my ribs. I held my breath, listening intently. Silence. Had I imagined it? Maybe it was pipes settling, or rodents. Though the sound hadn't felt like scurrying, it felt methodical, deliberate. Scratch. Scratch. There it was again. Closer this time. My eyes were wide open now, staring uselessly into the blackness. Every nerve ending felt frayed, alive with a sudden, cold dread. Sleep was now an impossibility. Something was wrong here. Terribly wrong. Sleep, when it finally came, was shallow and fractured, haunted by the phantom sensation of tiny claws scraping just inches from my head. I jolted awake with the first gray, a dawn filtering through the gap in the curtains. The oppressive, heavy silence of the room pressed in on me. The scratching was gone. My first instinct was to check the wall behind the headboard. I ran my hands over the cheap, textured wallpaper, feeling for any loose panels, any holes, any rational explanation. Nothing. Just solid wall. My eyes scanned the room, looking for anything out of place. My gaze landed on the flimsy chair I'd wedged under the doorknob. It seemed slightly askew. Not drastically, but enough that I couldn't be certain I'd left it exactly like that. Had it shifted when the building settled? Or had something pushed against the door during the night? I shook my head, trying to clear the cobwebs of fear and exhaustion. Lack of sleep makes you paranoid. Ethan, get it together. I forced myself through the motions of getting ready, deliberately avoiding looking too closely at the room's grimy details. A quick splash of cold water on my face in the tiny bathroom. The mirror above the sink was speckled with age, reflecting a tired, pale version of myself. I decided against trying the shower again. Coffee. I needed coffee. The motel didn't offer breakfast, not even a sad continental spread. Just a sputtering coffee machine in the lobby that produced a liquid vaguely resembling tar. I choked down half a cup under the impassive gaze of the same desk clerk from last night. who seemed to be a permanent fixture behind the counter. He didn't acknowledge me beyond a grunt when I asked if there was a local diner nearby. There wasn't. Just a gas station minimart a few miles back the way I came. Great. Back in the room, I tried to get some work done on my laptop, needing the distraction. The Wi-Fi signal was predictably terrible, cutting in and out. As I sat hunched over the scar desk, trying to coax a stable connection, I heard it. A loud thump followed by the distinct sound of something heavy, like furniture, being dragged across the floor in the room, directly above mine. I froze, listening. Silence. Then another scrape, drag, thump. It sounded deliberate, rhythmic. Annoyance warred with the returning tendrils of fear. Who the hell was rearranging their room at a.m.? I considered banging on the ceiling, but the sound stopped as suddenly as it began. Maybe someone was checking out, though I hadn't seen anyone else moving around. A few hours passed in relative quiet, punctuated only by the intermittent grinding and the distant highway drone. I managed to send a few emails, the mundane task momentarily grounding me. Then, the television clicked on. I jumped, startled. The screen flared to life, displaying nothing but dancing black and white static, accompanied by a low hiss. I hadn't touched the remote. I grabbed it from the nightstand and hit the power button. The screen went dark. Weird electrical surge, maybe. Old wiring, like the flickering bathroom light. 10 minutes later, it clicked on again. Same static, same hiss. Okay, now it was getting annoying. I walked over and unplugged the damn thing from the wall socket. Problem solved. Except it wasn't. As I sat back down, I heard it again. Faint, but unmistakable. Voices. Muffled, indistinct chatter, like a radio playing softly in another room. But I was alone. The TV was unplugged. The walls were thin, sure. But the sound seemed closer. Almost inside the room with me. I held my breath, straining to make out words, but it remained just out of reach. A meaningless murmur that faded after a minute, leaving the silence feeling even heavier. Enough was enough. Rational explanations were wearing thin. I grabbed my key and headed back down to the lobby. The clerk looked up from a newspaper, his expression unchanged. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "Is anyone staying in the room above mine?" "Room 17. He blinked slowly. "Nope." "Second floor's just you tonight." My stomach tightened. Well, someone was dragging furniture around up there earlier this morning. And the TV in my room keeps turning itself on. He folded his newspaper deliberately. "Old building," he said, his voice flat. "Pipes make noise. Wiring's touchy. Probably just interference." He offered no apology, no offer to check it out. Just dismissal. "Right," I said, feeling a surge of frustration and helplessness. "Thanks." Back in the oppressive quiet of room 7, the unease solidified into genuine anxiety. I wasn't imagining things. The clerk either knew something and didn't care, or was completely oblivious. Neither option was comforting. I felt trapped, isolated. I found myself gravitating towards the bathroom, drawn by a morbid curiosity. The air near the sink felt colder than the rest of the room. a distinct chill that raised goosebumps on my arms. I stared at the mirror. It looked normal, just old and speckled. But as I watched, a patch of condensation began to bloom near the center, spreading outwards, even though no water had been run for hours. It was like someone breathing on the glass, but slow, deliberate. I wiped it away with my sleeve, my hand trembling slightly. My reflection stared back, wide-eyed. For a split second, I thought I saw something shift behind me in the reflection, a flicker of movement near the shower stall. I spun around. Nothing. Just the stained shower curtain hanging limply. My eyes went back to the mirror. I leaned closer, examining the tarnished metal frame. And then I saw it, scratched faintly into the metal at the bottom corner, almost obscured by grime, were 2 letters and a year, KM 1987. KM. Who was KM? What happened in 1987? Was it related to the scratching? The voices? The feeling of being watched? A cold dread washed over me. This wasn't just random occurrences. Something had happened here. I backed out of the bathroom, suddenly wanting to put as much distance between myself and that mirror as possible. I even considered covering it with a towel, but the thought felt absurd, like admitting defeat to whatever this was. I spent the rest of the afternoon pacing the small room, jumping at every creak and groan. Leaving felt like the only sane option, but the thought of driving another 12 hours on no sleep, feeling this level of anxiety, seemed dangerous. One more night, I told myself. Just get through one more night, get some real sleep, and leave at first light. As dusk settled, painting the sky outside the grimy window in shades of bruised purple and orange, the scratching started again. Louder this time. Sharper. Coming from multiple points inside the wall behind the bed. It sounded frantic, desperate. I stood frozen in the middle of the room, every muscle tensed. Then, abruptly, the scratching stopped. Silence descended again, thick and expectant. Splash! The sound ripped through the quiet. It came from the bathroom. The unmistakable sound of the shower turning on. Full blast. My blood ran cold. I hadn't gone near the bathroom since discovering the initials. I wasn't imagining it. Water was hammering against the floor of the shower stall. Slowly, heart pounding against my ribs, like a trapped bird. I moved towards the bathroom door, which stood slightly ajar. Steam was already beginning to billow out, carrying the scent of mildew and something else. Something metallic, almost like old pennies. I pushed the door open wider. The shower was indeed running, water cascading down. The mirror above the sink was completely fogged over, a blank, gray canvas. And then, I saw it. Forming slowly on the steamy surface of the mirror, appearing from nowhere, was a handprint. Fingers splayed wide, palm pressed flat. It wasn't sensation clearing. It was like moisture coalescing into the shape, dark against the gray. As if someone was standing on the other side of the glass, hidden in the silver, pressing their hand against it, trying to get through. I stumbled backwards, hitting the doorframe. My breath hitched in my throat. My eyes darted around the small room, searching the shadows, expecting something. Anything. I grabbed the heavy, ceramic base of the bedside lamp, hefting it like a club. Rationalization was gone. Dismissal was impossible. This wasn't faulty wiring or old pipes or an overactive imagination. This was real. Something was in this room with me, and it wasn't friendly. The handprint on the mirror. The shower blasting scalding water into the empty stall. The lamp base clutched in my white, knuckled fist. My mind screamed one coherent thought amidst the panic: get out. I didn't bother packing. Toiletries, laptop, clothes, none of it mattered. I threw on my jeans and jacket over my shirt, grabbed my wallet and keys, which were, unnervingly, back on the nightstand again, wrenched the flimsy chair away from the doorknob, and bolted out of room 7, slamming the door shut behind me. I didn't look back. I half ran, half stumbled down the slick wooden stairs, heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The lobby was empty, the desk unmanned. Good. I burst out into the pre-dawn gloom. The drizzle had stopped, but the air was cold and heavy with mist. My car. Just get to the car. I fumbled with the key fob, clicking the unlock button. Nothing happened. I clicked again, frantically. Still nothing. The battery. No, the interior light usually came on. I jammed the key into the door lock. It turned, thank God, and threw myself inside, slamming the door shut. Key in the ignition. Turn. Click, where, click. Nothing. Click, where, click. Dead, completely dead. Not even a struggling cough from the engine. It had been running perfectly fine 12 hours ago. Panic clawed its way up my throat. No, this couldn't be happening. I tried the headlights. Nothing. The radio. Silence. It was like the car's entire electrical system had just died. Okay, phone. Call roadside assistance. Call anyone. I snatched my phone from my pocket. No service. Glared back at me from the top of the screen. The Wi-Fi signal I'd barely clung to in the room was non-existent out here. I was cut off. Isolated. Trapped. A wave of despair washed over me. Stuck at the Starlight Motel with whatever the hell was in room 7. The image of the handprint forming on the steamy mirror flashed in my mind. The sound of the shower turning on by itself. The scratching. The feeling of being watched. No. I couldn't just sit here. If I couldn't leave, I had to understand. Maybe if I knew what I was dealing with, I could figure out how to survive it. Knowledge is power, right? Or maybe just a way to distract myself from the paralyzing fear. Reluctantly, forcing my legs to move, I got out of the dead car and trudged back towards the motel. Back towards room 7. The thought of entering that space made my skin crawl. But where else could I go? The lobby felt just as unwelcoming, and hiding in the hallway seemed pointless. Back inside the room, the air felt thick, charged. The shower was off now. The bathroom mirror was clear, wiped clean, showing only my own terrified reflection. Had I imagined the handprint? No, it was real. I knew it was. I needed information. The Wi-Fi. It had been spotty before, but maybe I booted up my laptop, praying. A single, weak bar flickered into existence. Better than nothing. What did I know? Room 7, the Starlight Motel. And those initials scratched into the mirror frame, KM 1987. My fingers trembled as I typed into the search bar. Starlight Motel disappearance 1987. Starlight Motel, death room 7. KM 1987 motel. Most results were dead ends, generic motel listings, unrelated news from 87. The connection kept dropping, pages timing out. Frustration mounted, mixing with the fear. Then, buried deep in the search results, a link to an archived local newspaper forum from the early 2000s. The title: Anyone remember the Starlight Motel incident back in 87? My heart leaped. I clicked, praying the page would load. It crawled, agonizingly slow. Finally, text appeared. A short thread. People vaguely recalling something happening, rumors of a suicide or an accident. Then one post stood out. Yeah, I remember that. Catherine M. checked into room 7. Never checked out. They ruled it a suicide, overdose I think. But folks always whispered it was something else. Found her in the bathroom. Place always gave me the creeps after that. Heard weird stories about that room for years. Catherine M. KM 1987. Found in the bathroom. The scratching. The shower turning on. The handprint on the mirror. It wasn't random. It was her. Catherine. Trapped here. Maybe murdered. Just as the realization hit me, the laptop screen flickered and died. Not low battery, it was plugged in. Just dead. Like the car. Like the phone signal. Cut off again. And then the room exploded into chaos. A deafening bang slammed against the wall behind me, rattling the cheap art hanging there. The lights flickered violently, then went out completely, plunging the room into absolute darkness. A wave of intense cold washed over me, stealing my breath. "Get out!" A voice shrieked, not in my head, but seemingly from the air all around me. It was a woman's voice, filled with rage and despair. Something flew across the room in the dark, smashing against the wall near my head. The sound of shattering ceramic. The lamp. I scrambled backwards, tripping over my bag, landing hard on the floor. My breath came in ragged gasps. The air grew colder, impossibly cold. I could see my breath misting in the blackness. Then, a faint, grayish light began to emanate from the bathroom doorway. I pushed myself up against the far wall, heart pounding, unable to tear my eyes away. A figure slowly emerged from the bathroom, coalescing out of the dim light. Tall, gaunt, with long, stringy black hair plastered to its skull. Its skin was a sickly, mottled gray. It wore what looked like a tattered white nightgown. It was the woman from the mirror, the woman from the forum post. Catherine. But her face, it was contorted in a silent scream, eyes wide with terror and fury, fixed directly on me. Her mouth opened, impossibly wide, emitting a low, guttural moan that vibrated through the floorboards. She drifted towards me, one gray hand outstretched, fingers clawed. The metallic smell from the bathroom intensified, thick and coppery, the smell of old blood. I felt an invisible pressure building around my throat, tightening, choking me. I gasped for air, clawing at my neck, but there was nothing there. "Help me." The shriek had become a choked whisper filled with agony. "He did this." Who? Who did this? The clerk. Someone else. She was closer now, the chilling cold radiating from her. Her empty eyes bored into mine. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for, I don't know what. Death. Madness. I fumbled blindly on the floor for the heavy base of the lamp I'd grabbed earlier. My fingers closed around the cool ceramic. It wasn't much, but it was something. "Leave me alone," I choked out, the words barely audible over the pounding in my ears and the crushing pressure on my throat. I didn't do anything. The moaning intensified, turning into a high-pitched wail of pure anguish. The pressure increased. Black spots danced in my vision. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The pressure released. The cold receded slightly. The moaning faded into an echoing silence. I risked opening my eyes. The figure was gone. The gray light from the bathroom had vanished. The room was still pitch black, but the oppressive presence felt lessened, subsided. I lay there on the floor, gasping, trembling uncontrollably. Tears streamed down my face, tears of terror, of relief, I couldn't tell. Outside, through the grimy window, the first faint hints of dawn were beginning to paint the sky a sickly gray. I had survived the night, but the Starlight Motel and the ghost of Catherine M. weren't finished with me yet. I could feel it. The check-out time hadn't truly arrived. Dawn seeped through the grimy window like dirty water, painting the room in shades of exhausted gray. I was still huddled on the floor, the heavy lamp base lying uselessly beside me. Every muscle ached, my throat felt raw, and a tremor I couldn't control ran through my limbs. But I was alive. The oppressive presence, the suffocating cold, the terrifying visage of Catherine M., they were gone, replaced by an unnerving, hollow silence. Slowly, painfully, I pushed myself up. I surveyed the room, half, expecting to see signs of the night's chaos. Overturned furniture, broken glass, strange marks on the walls. But there was nothing. The bedside lamp was back on the nightstand, intact. The chair I'd kicked over was upright near the desk. The bathroom mirror reflected only the pale, haunted face of a man who looked 10 years older than he had 24 hours ago. It was almost worse than finding destruction. The room's return to a semblance. Normalcy felt like a gaslighting tactic, a silent insistence that the horrors I'd experienced hadn't really happened. But the memory, the visceral terror, was seared into my mind. It was real. Catherine was real. My car. I had to try the car again. The thought of spending another minute in this room, in this motel, was unbearable. This time, I didn't care about my laptop or toiletries. I grabbed my wallet. My phone, still stubbornly displaying no service, and the keys. I didn't look back as I pulled the door to room 7 shut, the click of the lock echoing ominously in the silent hallway. Downstairs, the lobby was still empty. No sign of the clerk. I pushed through the front door, into the cool, damp morning air. The mist clung to the ground, swirling around the isolated building like a shroud. I reached my car, dread coiling in my stomach. I slid the key of the ignition, took a deep breath, and turned. The engine sputtered, coughed, and then roared to life. Relief washed over me so intensely my knees almost buckled. It worked. The electrical system, inexplicably dead hours before, was functioning perfectly now. I didn't question it. I just threw the car into reverse, tires spitting gravel, as I backed out of the parking spot. As I pulled towards the exit, the lobby door opened. The clerk stepped out, holding a steaming mug. He watched me leave, his face as impassive as ever. But just as I turned onto the access road, I glanced in my rearview mirror. He was still standing there, watching. And was it my imagination, fueled by fear and lack of sleep? Or did I see the faintest hint of a smile playing on his lips? I didn't stick around to find out. I hit the gas, merging onto the highway, pushing the speed limit, needing to put as much distance between myself and the Starlight Motel as possible. The no service indicator on my phone vanished as I got further away, replaced by comforting bars of signal. The miles blurred past. I drove for hours, stopping only for gas and coffee, avoiding eye contact with anyone. The adrenaline faded, replaced by a bone, deep exhaustion and a gnawing, persistent anxiety. Every flicker of roadside neon, every isolated building glimpsed through the trees, sent a jolt of fear through me. I finally made it to Seattle, checked into a bright, modern chain hotel, the absolute antithesis of the Starlight, but sleep offered little escape. Nightmares plagued the gray, contorted face of Catherine M. Screaming silently, the feeling of icy fingers closing around my throat, the sound of frantic scratching inside walls. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, convinced I could still smell the mildew and decay of room 7. It wasn't just the nightmares. During the day, I'd catch movement at the edge of my vision, shadows that seemed too deep, too solid. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, I'd hear a faint whisper, almost too low to be sure, sounding like my name. I started avoiding mirrors, terrified I'd see something, looking back, other than my own reflection. I found myself constantly checking locks, sudden noises. The feeling of being watched, that pervasive dread I'd felt so strongly in the motel, hadn't entirely left me. It felt like a piece of the Starlight, a shard of Catherine's despair, had lodged itself inside me, following me across the country. I tried telling my new colleagues, framing it as a weird experience on the road. They laughed it off, told me I was overtired, suggested I'd probably just stayed in a dumpy motel and let my imagination run wild. I called my sister, tried to explain the sheer terror, the handprint, the apparition. She listened patiently but suggested, maybe I should talk to someone, maybe the stress of the move had gotten to me. No one believed me. No one could understand the reality of what happened in that room. The isolation I felt at the motel persisted. A different kind now, the isolation of knowing something terrifyingly real that no one else could accept. So, I'm writing this down. All of it. Posting it here, because where else can I turn? Maybe someone else has stayed at the Starlight Motel. Maybe someone else has encountered Catherine M. Or whatever else haunts that desolate place off the highway. Maybe someone will believe me. I escaped room 7, but I don't think I ever truly checked out. The experience lingers, a cold spot in my memory that refuses to warm. Sometimes late at night, when the city outside is quiet, I think I can still hear it faint, almost imperceptible, but there. Scratch, 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 coming from inside my own walls. Is it just trauma playing tricks on my mind? Or did Catherine M. follow me home? Does she still want help? Or does she just want company in her misery? I don't know. All I know is, if you're ever driving late at night, tired and looking for a place to rest, and you see that flickering neon sign for the Starlight Motel, for God's sake, keep driving. Don't stop. Don't ever stop.